Oh, absolutely. I mean, that goes across the board for any sort of ancient indigenous practice. We can't lose sight of those. Whatever they are, you're gravitating to it for a reason. I mean, forget about the manipulate. There's manipulation and everything, but the true core of the majority of belief systems throughout history, i.e., religious beliefs, are founded in an ancient connection with the universe, with the Tao, with God, with Buddha. It still is fundamentally there. And so the mysticism within it is being deferred. And, right now it's your public enemy number one. If you're religious, you must be some nutcase. Quite frankly, it's interesting because, I speak to a lot of Christians and they're afraid of energy. They're afraid of the idea that that there's someone that's in human form that has the ability to harness that, and through their own text, their own version of the Bible has been shown to them that this is evil in its nature. And that brings us back to the commandeering of your state of awareness, your state of mind, and we speak more on the fundamentals of when you're emotional, you're suggestible, and so that deep, state of change is, it starts when you explore simple tools like hypnosis that will literally alter your reality in seconds. It's a good baseline to be aware of. Is it a reflection of the high states of consciousness James and I are talking of? No, it's like the entry level sort of way to get there. But a lot of people are dismissing that, and we're getting, past life regression, and well, normally when I give someone past lives, they sort of get into a state, lay down, sit up, whatever, close your eyes, and when I transmit the lives before this one, you will witness them in your third eye like a movie, and you'll have the kinesthetic response from that. You will feel it through your whole body as you're experiencing it, and that's another cultivated ritual within Taoism that we train people in. Yet it's sort of been watered down to do a hypnosis course on the weekend, and I can regress your past lives 1,000 times over. And there's a degree of truth to that. And then there's also a commandeering of a narrative, this underlying intelligence that is not of the highest frequency that is taking place, and is commandeering people's narrative. And there seems to be this regulated effect of the same types of stories. I'm going back to Atlantis. I'm going back to Egypt. I'm going back to the tablets. I'm going back to it's big. And, quite frankly, dealing and being in this space for 30 years, practicing Taoism, being a priest, back in the day, you're looking at something completely different when it comes to spirit entities. And, sometimes I'll have a fire sale on, low watt frequencies that people would perceive as demonic, satanic, whatever. It's within their field. It's been constructed. We isolate, dissolve, and disperse that energy appropriately through specific practices. It's not the beginning and end of all things, yet it's an identification of a transmission that's coming through in different layers as being presented in other ways that you come to this conclusion that I would like a little guidance from someone who might have a little more insight into it, and they end up on my doorstep. What I'm going to tell you right now, which I find riveting, is that in the last 6 months, every time I come across someone within their field is some form of alien. I've never seen this in 30 years. Now, all of a sudden, the aliens are coming out everywhere. They're everywhere. Now, what is going on there, James? Why don't you help me out on that one? And I've got no problem with it. If I see it, I'll speak on it. Yet it is like a fire sale of these entities shape shifting within people's auric fields and presenting themselves as, I've had people just straight up in the presence of the residents that I'm a conduit of, literally have confessions. I've never said this before, but I'm an alien. Okay. Hey, look, this is what you're resonating with. This is where you're at in your own journey of consciousness. What are your thoughts on that?
You've opened up a big one here. There's often, in America, they often use Christians to refer to Protestants as opposed to Catholics, as opposed to both of them. I hear people say, well, we're Christian, we're not Catholic. And I come from a Catholic background. Of course, I have respect for Protestantism, but there's different strands in Protestantism as there is in Catholicism, which, and again, there's always good and bad. And there is the simulacrum is in Catholicism as well. It's clear. And the infiltration, the takeover, all that kind of stuff. And in Protestantism, I have criticized the rapture movement, which is huge in the United States. I've done an article on John Nelson, or I've done a talk on John Nelson Darby on New Thinking Aloud, explaining my attitude, and because he studied in the same places that I did, and he developed this rapture, which is critical in relation to geopolitics and the British Empire. I don't believe I am more intrigued with Garabandal and believe in that in relation to this idea the Virgin Mary talked about, an illumination of conscience that was going to happen for everybody. It's very, very interesting. I've talked about that as well. But so firstly, I would say it's very, very important. I'm not talking about you, but to people, the younger people that listen, don't experiment with things that you don't know about, and don't engage in things, that you see on the internet. There's an awful lot of young people interested in Satanism, in demonology. It's normalized on the things that I've been looking at. It's frightening. I was shocked. Call me old-fashioned. Maybe I'm a very old-fashioned. I was shocked when the kids come home from school and telling me about the 9-year-olds with the satanic things on their face going to school. I said, oh, yeah, okay. Call me an old-fashioned Irish Catholic. And in many senses, in countries like this, it might be more socially acceptable to say you're a Satanist than to say you're a Catholic. So there's something deeply, deeply wrong there. I have said that. I have said that that people that don't believe in demons may see them very soon. That there's an assault on humanity. So again, whether some things, aliens, demons, they're mixed. Sometimes we're talking about entities which are self-contained and ontologically real. So there is, in a lot of people who talk about spirituality, don't actually believe in these things, that they believe they're all constructs in the human psyche. And certainly there are constructs, there are autonomous systems, as Jung talked about. And Jung was a bit dubious about the ontologically reality. He thought that, and in many ways, his notion of the subconscious is a substitute for the things being real. In my view, there's plenty of ontologically real spirits out there, and I've been trying to identify some consistency in relation to the description. I did a talk with Christopher Knowles, who's very clear that it's about the watchers in the Bible. These, the big figures that came down and that are described in biblical terms and in apocryphal texts that didn't get into the Bible, where they mate with the humans that were here and give certain gifts of technology to the people that were here. Again, the Promethean myth, the same as the Promethean myth. So, I, as I said to him, I haven't formed a final opinion on this. I find it very interesting looking at. I'm very interested in the Marian apparitions. Because the Catholic Church is usually good on doing a lot of studies. If you look at the Marian apparition in La Salette. I've been up high up on the mountains in France, and I went to visit this summer, and I'm reading the old reports in French, and they consistent investigations of the boy and girl that saw the Virgin Mary, and the amount of times they were examined, and they were utterly consistent in their story. And then there was secrets, which is always in these secrets about what's happened. It's interesting in there that the Virgin Mary identifies a figure, because people don't pay attention to some of these, in relation to the description. She identifies the figure that was dominant even in the convents, in the religious places, even, or some of the religious places in France, as Asmodeus. So Asmodeus is a figure that goes back to Middle East, ancient times, various forms, a lot of discussion about who he is, but he's sometimes equivalent to Satan, Lord of the demons, is the thing. Now, so there's some evidence, when you get evidence coming from different sources or different things, or coming up in reports of the things, I find that quite interesting. And there's that stuff about the Da Vinci Code was based on other books written by Scots, Sinclair might be the name, about this church in France that was linked to Mary Magdalene and all this kind of stuff. So that there was books that your man used for the Da Vinci Code, and the books were about this church in Rennes-le-Château, in I think it's called, in France. And what's interesting in that is that this is a Catholic church, supposedly, or it was, but inside the church is a statue to Asmodeus, which is quite interesting. So there's evidence when you look at it at some of the key places. There's particular worship of particular beings, and he's associated with this demon is associated with lust, the development of lust. And there's an very interesting story by Arthur C. Clarke called "I Remember Babylon." So Arthur C. Clarke is the person who claims credit for developing the communication satellite. I believed everything technically when he wrote it. When this was at the end of the 60s and in the 70s in particular, I read most of his work, and was very interested in it. And he talked in the 60s, and I'm sure I heard these late on about what the future was. So he describes all this, the consequences of communication satellite. Totally in. I taught communication technology law after. It was very, but at the end of it, he came to where humans were going, and he said, "The future is inevitable merger with machines." And I said, something went wrong there. There's something wrong here. And from then, I just thought he made a mistake. Who would want to merge with machines? So he is the follow-on from H.G. Wells, selling all this space exploration, life extension, this abolition of religion. But in his book about how the world was won, explaining about the submarine cables, because when they began to lay the cables around the world, this was the start of the network that was controlled. It started in the 1850s. That network that was building up using the imperial sailing lines. They laid down the cables that part of the process that were growing up today. So they had the idea first, and the technology they knew would come afterwards. So in this story, I Remember Babylon, it's notionally a fictional story, but he puts his own name in it. So he's telling us really that this was something that happened. And in the story, he's at a conference, and someone comes up to him and said, "Oh, Mr. Arthur C. Clarke, we love your work and all that, and you've been very influential." And it turns out that this is a very powerful person. And the powerful person is responsible for the management of the satellites and what the content is. And he says in it, he said, this system will, of course, or the implication, will destroy America. He said, "I liked America, but I still remember Babylon." and there's this idea that it's related back to an ancient idea. And the idea was, the implication was that they were going to, or the guy said, they were going to use the Kinsey report on human sexuality to change the world. They were going to use the satellite system to change humanity by using this, and that would lead to the downfall of America and institute the global governance system. So this is not fiction. This is really close to the truth when I followed all the different paths. And there's another critical thing that he explains, Arthur C. Clarke. All these Prometheans, again, believe in God. They just don't want to abide by the divine force. They don't want to do what the Taoists say: be humble and realize that you're a grain of be humble before them. They don't want to do that. No. So he says in this that with the joining together of, so digital is joining together. Well, then we go back to the Tower of Babel. Now this is quite incredible. A lot of people don't understand that the people that they think are very that reject religion because it's a fairy story, they really believe in it. It's the thing that drives them. So his interpretation is, and this is obviously reflecting this group, that in the Tower of Babel, the reason why God intervened in it was because if they had one language joining them all together in one place, then they could do what they want to do. That's what God said. That's what God says in the Bible. So their thinking is, well, if we get this again, if we build this again, then God doesn't have power over us. That's what their logic is. And he kind of admits that in this. So you have this combination of a deep, ancient fascination with Babylon going, and you have all these gods that come up that they're interested in: Moloch, Baal, all these things. They represent a reality for them. And it was interesting in that La Salette secret as well, that the Virgin Mary said that in the mid 18th century there was a lot of demons loosened from hell, and in that particular year. And I've explained that elsewhere, that I believe the period from 1853 to 1863 was the takeover, that we have been taken. 1963 was really the start of another phase, that really the systems had been laid in place to take over, it was only a matter of time before the move on to the next phase. So the demonic things are quite real. Ontologically, I don't have any problem. I know that there are entities that can move into human space, that they can. There are some of these grey figures are figures that can move into the human body. They're not all out there. And that, so there would have been demons in Christian terms. But these things are all the religious tradition, the yin, they say it, but there is an orchestration. There is an orchestration, and there is people that are committed to these things. So people say, "Well, you're a superstitious believer." It's these people that believe in these things and cultivate these forces, because the patience and humility that's necessary to adjust to the world is not there in certain people. They want it now. This is the whole story of the Faustian Pact. Give me the power, give me the the will, and I'll take the consequences afterwards. In Goethe's example, he kind of gets let off the hook. In Christopher Marlowe's example, he doesn't. Mephistopheles is waiting for him to bring him down to hell, and he tells him, "Are you sure you want to do it?" Yeah, they'll take the short-term things. So that Faustian idea is there. And this thing is going to manifest itself. It's shocking if you look at what young people are taking. Oh yeah, I've been contacting these beings and all that. So when they're, I would urge them not to get involved in things they don't have experience. As you've explained, you're involved in things and trained and for years. So for other people, They should be very, very careful about these things. But they're very, very real. And I mean, when you say about the resistance in relation to Christianity, the tradition of Christianity is to integrate under the power of Jesus the skills, because Jesus demonstrated his power over the demons. And here's an ironic fact: most of the sorcerers, most of the dark magicians, according to nearly all the standard gematria and all the standard things, they call on Jesus to protect them against the demons. Whereas they tell you they don't believe in any of this thing. No, you shouldn't believe in this. So some of these people that are selling the emerald tablets now, I'll bet you they will be saying, don't believe in all this. All this stuff is, all these rituals the church has, they're designed to confine you. The same as the argument, don't go to the light and all that. Well, I know there is a divine darkness as well, but I'm going to the light. I don't. I've written about it. Jesus said in the Gospel of Thomas, the non-canonical Gospel, if anyone asks you where you came from, tell them that you came from the place where light came into a chord of its own being. I came from there, and I'm going back there. So you can come up with any cock and bull story and tell me about these tablets and this and why you should ignore all the good guys and go to the darkness. I'm not going there. Good luck to you. Believe in those if you want. I'm not going there, and they're not taking my soul, and I don't want them to take anyone else's soul. I don't want them to take your life, or you to take your life. I don't want anyone to engage deliberately, experimentally, with things they don't understand. Contact. When I'm talking about developing your capacity, it's not to achieve some sensational thing. It's not to achieve some sensational power. It's a simple thing to develop who you are, and then find the paths through the thing, or in conjunction, or in conjunction with someone who is not seeking to cannibalize or vampirize you, or utilize you, or lead you astray. And the only way you know you're not leading astray is when you have some orientation. And this is a classic thing in Sufism about orienting yourself. And this is a very, very important. You can only orient yourself with something which has some tradition, which has been argued over the years, and that's there in Buddhism, in Taoism, in Christianity, in Islam. Whatever criticisms about the religion, there's deep intellectual traditions as well. You can't caricature elements. There's always difficulties about the things, but we're at the stage where we have to, we really have to deal, because these things are real, and we're being asked to invite these things into our being. We're being exposed, and children are being exposed. Children are being told these things are nice. There's looking at some of the pop music and being presented. It's clearly, obviously, satanic, dealing with the things. It's not made up. They're clear about that. They're telling you. And also, you're the bad person if you believe anything else. And this Satanism elements of it go very well with a deep, deep materialism, although there are also theistic Satanism. So there's different types of it. So don't let them tell you that these traditional things are meaningless, because they know they're powerful. They know that these people, these traditions, have seen some of this before. And my hope is that they can find a common ground to move above knee-jerk reactions, to move above into the next dimension, and rediscover the real spirit in their own tradition. And in the Christian sense, if you believe in Christianity, if you believe in Jesus Christ, and you live in accordance with the dogma, if you want to call it that, well, generally, if you talk to people that are exorcists in the thing, that it's highly unlikely that those people get affected by the thing, because they have some protection. And also, there's another benefit. People forget this about Carl Jung. and I have a critical take on Carl Jung as well as appreciating the good things he done. But Carl Jung wrote a lot about the traditional mass, which has been suppressed now. He thought it was one of the greatest contributions to civilization. People don't realize that. He also said that he had very few Catholics coming to him. It's 6 in 30 years or so. The implications was that the thing at the time was working for them, that it was real, it was true, and it worked psychically. Subsequently, in the 60s, again, key era, around this time, at the end of the takeover, they changed the Latin Mass. Now, a lot of I think the impulse came from Switzerland, the context in which Jung, some of his studies may have been deconstructive of that, intended to be. The other people that were interested in the Latin Mass was the CIA, believe it or not, who had closely influenced Switzerland. And it was made clear that in order to get the New World Order, you had to abolish Catholicism, which is why H.G. Wells wanted to bomb, wrote a book in favor of bombing the Vatican. So all of these things, you have to be careful that we're not, whatever flaws in organizations or whatever, like, for example, the people that tell me about what the Catholic Church did, I'm not defending them in that context, but just getting perspective hundreds of years ago. Do they take responsibility for U.S. foreign policy for the last 50 years? Do they want to have a comparison? They voted? The people that voted for these policies. So let's just have proper arguments and realize that the war is for your soul, and some of it is actually happening. That's what I've described as the greatest game. It's for your consciousness, which is effectively your soul and your eternal spirit. This is where we're at, and that's the cruel reason why we should go back to the good path, to go back to the spiritual path, go back to alignment with nature, not to take a simulacrum, a mechanical nature that's being projected an automaton, or become automatons in the plantation of automatons, as I've described it, in techno bondage or tech bondage, as I've described it. Don't do that. So I've no doubt about these demonic forces. They are proliferating, and it's a major problem. We're talking about mass possession, which is a prelude to mass technical possession. In some ways, whether they are possessed by a demon, an alien, or mechanical forces, amounts to the same thing. You have given up your parking space. Someone else is parking in the sole executive function of your consciousness. You've given it up, and you become a hungry ghost. You become a wanderer, unable to recover. So we have the out-of-body experiences. I've talked about that. But we also have the warnings about not being able to get back into your body. And this is the position that we're putting ourselves in through addiction, attachment, opening up to demons, alien forces that already exist in the earth. And all of those things are genuine things. So a few years ago, because of the dominance of the scientific method, materialist things, people laughed at. They won't be laughing so much in the future.
Yeah. I mean, my goodness, the stories that I have in relation to the very nature of that, and I want people to be very clear. I'm not dismissing what's going on. Is there's an infinite amount of spirits and entities that are occupying the very space that we're in. The question is when I say it's a construct of the individual, you're creating a banging drum that's drawing the attention of this entity and bringing it to your very forefront. And so, people are like, well, what do you think of things like, Freddy Krueger or Jason Voorhees, these massacre people from the 80s? They're the icons. They've turned Michael Myers into this sort of like God, or Freddy Krueger or whatever. I said, they're very real. And they're like, what? I said, that came from the deep, sadistic, satanic bowels of Wes Craven's mind that's created this entity, this spirit, that it lives on constantly through the replaying of its movies and everything else. And if you tap into it, which I can show you, that energy is real. And so, it can commandeer you in all different ways. It doesn't have to be in the form of a materialist version, i.e., a doll, a mask. It's just the notion of it being in the presence of your mind is the suggestibility that it takes to, if you are not. And so when I've spoken deeply with many of my peers, Christian, Catholic priests, when it comes to exorcisms, that's a whole different ballgame. And this idea for most people, it's conceptual, of being fearless. I'll repeat this very clearly to the audience. If you are even in doubt of, for a fraction of a second, engaging in these types of practices, don't. I enter into that space fearless, and that's one of the very major, if not the most powerful tool, and my connection with the Tao and my teachers that make it possible. That it's very, very much a situation where you engage with these entities, and quite frankly, all the time. The end result of this energy that will crush it and dissolve it and obliterate it is love. It just, I'm sorry, people want to oh, no. Only one time in all these years I came across an entity. It took about 3 hours of negotiation. Because there's a negotiation, there's a much deeper understanding of what is the purpose of this entity and why is it commandeering the very state of your physical, mental, emotional representation. Because there's a gaping hole in the fundamental perception of your reality that gives it gateway to enter and form different viewpoints of what you perceive is your thoughts. And so this is, again, we're not pushing this narrative of being fearful. I don't want you to fall into the mistake of being afraid of what we're speaking of. We just, James and I are just suggesting, we're offering you a better view of what you're speaking of. And if you're ever thinking about entertaining this type of stuff, if you're not 100% clear on who you are, knowing where you're going, having a complete connection with the state of all things, the Tao, God, Buddha, then I would suggest that it's not for you, not at this moment. And if it is for you, then you should go through the appropriate type of practice training that will take you a bit of time. It's not going to be I did an exercise class of the week and I'm solid. It's going to take a bit of a processes for you to develop a skill that you can enter into these spaces and be serving to the higher good. And the outcome is, of course, ultimately the dissolving of this sort of energy. And the reality is you're seeing it seeping through, even from the early stage of just the development of Playboy. What's the necessity of that? Where did that come from? And how have we gone from, hiding your dad's Playboy in the shed out the back to now we have this onslaught where you don't even know whether someone that you're talking to right now is actually looking at pornography as they're speaking to you, because it's just so prevalent. It's everywhere. Now, what's the relevance of that, and what does that mean? Well, personally, I think James will probably have a pretty similar viewpoint that I do on this. It's like a commandeering of your energy. And what's going on is it's directing you to take your sight off what's really happening. and by doing that, you are occupied in processes of what you believe is self-fulfilling level of satisfaction that is really minimal in the greater scheme of things in relation to your well-being, your expansion, your eternal knowing. It's actually trapping you in a certain space and limiting your very perception. And then much deeper is what I've noticed more, having 6 kids of my own and the eldest being 12, the current moment in history and the programming that it's an idea to believe that the need to reproduce is not an option, that you can identify as something else, and that even if your physical form does not present itself and it's tangible, you can, confess to the world, I'm a unicorn, I'm a dragon, I'm whatever I want to be, I'm on this, I'm by that, and it goes deeper into the more you are sold on the idea that engaging with someone of the opposite sex is a bad idea, and that you really believe that you are more attracted to the same sex, is the very head screw and the very implemented mind control that James has been talking about, and I've been talking about through this whole episode. And it's prevalent. It's like everywhere. And it comes down to our children's material. It comes down to all this stuff. And you are seeing it. And more people are like, oh, I don't want to bring children into this world. Scary place to be. I don't want to, I feel like I'm getting this inclination that I'm attracted to the same sex. And this is a big deal. And what happens with that is, I couldn't care less what your sexual preference is. But the reality is there's a commandeering of the baseline of humanity, which is reproducing as one of the major parts of being human, is the ability to create life. And when you want to step away from that, and you're being given these ideas over time, and when you form it, and I saw it very clearly in many of my friends who had, children that went through the academic processes, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on an education to be presented with this idea over the last couple of years that their parents are evil, that they have certain viewpoints of race, of culture, from their programming. And you're like, hang on, where did this come from? I spent $400,000 for you to go through an Ivy League school to lynch me because I don't believe in a three-letter organization that's literally having a mind screw, a psyop that rippled through the whole world, let alone this country. And if you don't believe in this, then we need to hang you from a tree. I'm like, what's going on here? This is insane. And so I don't know whether I went down another rabbit hole, but what are your thoughts on
that? I've actually found myself getting more interested in the traditional Catholic practices, the Latin Mass, the old one that they're banning, because of that as well. But it is a profound thing, and the sense that there is something about an objective truth. People get obsessed with all various details, but the idea that there is something which is true, there is something out there which is true in a cosmic sense, is an important thing. But as I said, we can reconcile all the best bits of the perennial philosophy because they say similar things in relation to base. What was clear, and I've tried to lay it out in my recent books, is that the empire, and particularly British Empire, not just them, but I mean at that level, the powerful European empires, the elites, again, it's not about the British people, the English people. In fact, the English people have suffered at the hands of their various elite governments over the centuries, from the time the Peasants' Rebellion in the 1300s, right up to the Luddites, and that they objected to everything along the way and sought to ameliorate. And of course, we had the Magna Carta, and even the barons opposing the king, going back there. So it's not about that. It's about elites. And at the end of the 19th century, up to the 1920s, they began to plan how they would rule the world in the future. And it was particularly helped by part of it by rebellions against them, the Irish rebellions, whatever. They were saying, well, if they're all rebelling against us, it'll be more difficult. So that's why they began to move towards this other form of control. In the 19th century, we had the eugenics movement. So the British upper class, like other upper classes, what are they interested in? They're interested in breeding horses, in breeding dogs, in breeding in general, because their theory was, and Virginia Woolf states this about a person living in Russell Square, our old centre. She said the idea was that the privileged class, who of course is the rich person, the rich group at the top that have all the power, that they have 10 children and 9 of them will have the same values of the people before them that were and they'll be able to continue, and one won't. But they will persist in that way. So they knew they were the privileged class. What they have done in the 100 years after that and more is known that they're a privileged class, invested loads of money to convince the poor people that they were the privileged class. So, I mean, this is a great irony. So if you take Irish people, for example, they say, well, now they've been, some of them are being convinced that they've been oppressing other people. Whether they were one of the first modern colonies, the only really remaining colony in Europe, the history of oppression, number of genocides, famine, every kind of grim thing we can find in Irish history. And all of a sudden, this generation is being convinced that they've been oppressing people because of the colour of their skin. And when they went to Britain, there was no blacks, no Irish, no dogs allowed. My aunt, who lives there, remembers that. When they went to America, there's a book written from a left perspective about how the Irish became white. They had to become white in the terms over there. So now these are the privileged classes, those poor people that were escaping oppression, and those people in Ireland that weren't doing imperial stuff, that were fighting against empire. All of a sudden, they've been the oppressive class. So what we have going on is a deliberate policy that they want to implement this eugenics thing, that all the movements, DNA was about control of the gene that they were studying, Bernal's studying, and he's also studying that mysterious substance, chitin, the insect stuff, the same man. Because of X-ray crystallography, they can find the structure of things. Oh, we can find the structure of life. We can control life. All those ideas came together. The eugenics, after the theory of evolution in particular, using the upper class, using its power, control communism and capitalism. They're happy to use both. And again, they come from the same sources. Trotsky, when they're going from New York, they're going from London, they're going from the capitalist centers. The materialist runners of the world, left or right, doesn't matter. As Deng Xiaoping said in China, it doesn't matter whether we use a black cat or a white cat to catch the mouse, and that's why they could use capitalism equally. It depends on whether you have taken spirit out of the equation. So then the policy was to, what in all the structures are there, in ancient structures, in the elder structures, there's a father figure, the God the Father. Get rid of that. Make the father the bad thing, take it away, create dissension between men and women, have them fighting, believe they're missing out on, and certainly, of course, there had to be things be rebalanced, but society was being rebalanced. There was, as Camille Paglia talks about from a feminist perspective, there was a different separation of roles in a traditional society, an agricultural society. When industrialization, it disturbed that, and it made things different. So then, of course, once you get that split, you can work on splitting up the family. They told us what they were going to abolish. They're going to abolish religion, the family, and the nation state, and they've done that remarkably well. So recently they had a vote in Ireland to change the constitution. The people rejected it. They wanted to do away with the idea of the family, so they have an idea of a durable relationship instead of the family. So they're going to abolish the family. You're going to be a bad person if you have a family. You're already a bad person if you have children. I know people here with big families. They get abuse and poison letters about having big families now. And this, you're whatever. I don't know what they say, but like parasite in the environment kind of thing. And then the idea of childbirth is going to become anathema. I mean, there's so many cesarean sections as a matter of routine. It will be easy to jump to a conclusion where you don't have any children. You have the ectogenesis, and it's better for the environment. All this kind of stuff. I don't care what people do with their body as long as it's consenting adults and they do themselves. But what I do, what people have to understand is that they have decided, they created compartments, and they want to change your spiritual identity to some constructed identity, which is based on your sexual preference, as they said they were going to do. And they want to put you in a box. And remember, and this is a thing I warn my people that are being put into boxes. This is what the Nazis did. Again, not fair, but think about it as a sociological thing. The Nazis created the boxes and the census just before they started persecuting people. They started saying, bringing in questions that would enable them to identify the groups they want. And they're also creating groups whose worldview is utterly opposed to each other. And they're bringing them in. This is the great technique of empire. Divide and conquer. Create a difference and then put them in. They always love these fighting, bear baiting, cockfighting and all this. They're preparing massive ones. They're bringing in populations that are going to, they'll be happy for them to fight it out. All of this is intended to weaken homogeneity of any sort that would be able to resist these processes. So when they come in with digital currency and all these things, and then you say, you have to get a chip, there's little ability to rely on any group to oppose it. There's little religious opposition. I have said to people, you don't really understand how real the danger of utter collapse of the Catholic Church from its center is. They say about all the money, it's bankrupt. The thing is bankrupt, and there's a possibility in the film The Shoes of the Fisherman, this thing with Anthony Quinn in the 60s by the prophetic writer Morris West, where the Pope comes on, he comes out, he's elected a Ukrainian as it happens, and he comes out on St. Peter's Square after being elected, and he says, I'm giving away all the buildings of the Catholic Church and we're going back to poverty. All of these things can happen because there cannot be any oppositional force to the new force that's going to govern us, to govern us with AI. And deconstruction is the key word. And for all these look at every one of them, the major figures have some connection with transhumanism, with space exploration, all the things that go back to what I've said is the core. And more specifically, Bill Gates, look at his background and his father's background, eugenics and DNA and population. And population is a big thing because they want to reduce population. I have an idea from Thomas Malthus, whose only connection with London was around Russell Square, interestingly enough. And they have this idea of cutting down population because they don't have any love of humans. There's a great misanthropy. All of these things are laid out. They're utterly consistent. They're telling you where they're going to do. And I like humans, and I like the human race, and I don't think it should be abolished. And I don't think these people have the right to do so. And I don't understand why people are surrendering. There's so many people out there. I don't have any. I love Chinese people, and the Chinese people are saying, "Why are you guys in the West? We thought that you had something to say on this. You talked about human rights and you had values, and you've nothing to help us. You've no goal to give us, and you're joining in with the same stuff, and you're supplying technology to our governments to do these things." And these, the sheer volume of humans
You do psychometry on this, and I can find the evidence of the person that lost their life for this very phone for less than a couple of handfuls of rice, and they're throwaways. And then you go deep on this, and your heart's going to open, and you're going to cry for a long time. And this is what James is speaking of.
And look at the makeup of those phones. Look at the chemicals in it, the elements in it, the elements in your lovely green car, and you'll find out that there's poor families in Africa working in slave conditions, digging this stuff out of the ground, damaging things on islands in the Pacific. They're being destroyed, and you're told it's environmentally friendly as they construct this net, the electronic net. The electronic mafia do it, and they tell you that they're freeing you as they're destroying there and getting ready to create the plantation of automatons, of which we become automatons in it. So it's a consistent historical pattern. I've been trying to identify it blow by blow, and you can see an absolute, it's undeniable if you follow it. So there's all kinds of false explanations being sold. They do all this, they're presenting, well, it's this group of people behind it, this group of people, and they're all wrong, and they're all setups. There's specific pathologies of these conditions that we can trace historically. We have to trace historically. That's evidenced by academic articles, by good scholarship that says this happened, here is this, and you can follow the path and you can see it, and it explains where we are and why we are now and how we're being manipulated, and how there's loads of people contributing to it, some as useful idiots. Loads of people in the universities really don't know what they're doing. They don't know their arse from their elbow, and I can testify that was certainly now. I mean, they used to be. And then there's a massive promotion of people who are incapable of any thought. There's a massive promotion of people who don't have who don't have the abilities necessary to do the job. These are ideal people to execute the plans. Now, my family were involved in constitutional politics as well. I knew what was. I saw the change as well. I think two people of the same name as me, my relations, were involved in were elected 16 different times to parliaments in Ireland. So I know what I'm talking about in relation, and I saw the changes, and I saw it close up, and I saw the people that were involved in these things, and I knew things that were happening. There was a transformation in the world politics in the West in the 90s in particular, and it was associated with the establishment of international bodies. It's well established, and they're working away, and they're not. People think some way that are winning in some way. They keep on hearing this thing. Oh, we won now. We got them scared. It's full steam ahead. They're nearly there. They're nearly there to begin to drop the final chapters of the end game. So, again, I'm not trying to depress people. We have to wake up. There's no choice. What can you say? You go to the doctor and you have something very, very bad in your body, and you want them to say, "I'll be okay. Don't worry about that." You want them to tell you what the thing is, to diagnose it properly, and then work on the thing. We're in big trouble, and we have to kind of pay attention to it. And knowing what you're dealing with is empowering, because whatever you're going to face is not going to be empowering. You're just going to be demoralized. That's the objective. I say that knowledge of what's happening, proper analysis, robust analysis, gives you an extra type of intellectual strength. Oh, I know what's happening there. I'm not falling for that. You can stuff that. No thanks. I'm not complying with that. Not taking that. Because then you can spot the next thing that's coming up. They already have disease X. There's millions and billions being spent already on the remedy for a disease which hasn't happened. Now tell me how that works. That's what they're doing. They're at the labs, and they're claiming to be preparing the remedy for the next disease X, which is coming, the next pandemic, as they're finalizing this World Health Organization treaty and a network which will override the internal power of the state at the behest of what effectively is a corporate-run body. And of course, the corporate of the pharmaceutical company. This is happening.
And
this network
I mean, who's the major contributor?
Yeah, no, but it's just set up. They're just puppets of these. Nothing got to do with health, and nothing got to. So you have, of course, Gates and pharmaceutical companies, and they're the big. But this suits the agenda. The people that, what was their history? Well, eugenics and control. And people say, well, I'd like to hear Bill Gates. What qualification does the man have on any of this? He doesn't have any qualification in these things. Where did he get his power from? We had to go knocking around the doors and ask people for their votes. That's the way it used to happen. I went around with relations, knocking on the door, saying, "How we do? We're going to do this," and you had to answer to the people. These people have assumed the power out of a godlike power because they believe they're gods. So we have to stop bowing down between, the human race, get up off its knees. The great only appear great because we're on our knees, as a famous quote said. So we really have to wake up. So these are the people that are making us depressed. It's not the people who are seeking to provide an analysis to say, hold on a second, that bait you've taken, they're closing the door now and you won't get out. They're not the people that should be criticized or in this. We really have to begin to activate our consciousness and apply it. And there's another test to it. If we cannot do this, if the good people of the world cannot unite with their spiritual consciousness and demonstrate the spiritual gifts by applying them to the problem, well, then that will vindicate the idea of this group that their path to evolution is the correct one. Meaning there is a challenge to the spiritual communities of the world to show the fruits that they're meant to have, because all the traditions say there are fruits that come from the spiritual paths. They're in the Bible in relation to kindness, forbearance, etc., and the ability to see things clearly, and these prophetic gifts, the siddhis in the Indian tradition, and the same in Taoism. There's gifts, as you said, there's things, provables that are there. If these things are true, well, then now is the time that they have to be applied. Now is the time that they have to be used. Now is the time they have to be relied on. Now is the time they have to be committed to. Now is the time that the belief has to be, I don't say that in a woolly sense, the real belief has to be applied. The feeling has to be applied at appropriate time to the problem that is out there. And I believe that the tradition, as I've said it before in relation to the Christian Golgotha and all this, is a prefiguration of what happens to the human race, a process of being attacked, going through the process, and even an attempted crucifixion, like we have an all. You can make an analogy between the things that are going into the earth and the nails, except all these levels of symbolism are there indicating that we're going through a process that's a deadly process. And what we have to do is come out of this with a spiritual resurrection as well, building on our traditions.
Right. 1,000,000% is this realization, the watering down, and this even goes for this spiritual community that's currently sort of merging through social media. There is such a deficit of awareness, and it's all show and no go. It's a lot of smoke and mirrors that are taking place, that a lot of people are just resonating with people that are they're selling snake oil, and it's really at an all-time high. It's almost like I came across someone, and they just finished their equivalent to a sermon, and most of the response, thankfully, through the community was, my goodness, I feel like I just got exposed to a spiritual, network marketing push. There's a level of dismissal that people are sort of like, well, I'm being embodied. You don't want to be a part of anything. You're individual. You can't fool yourself. And this is not what we're speaking of. We're speaking of a a deeper rooted hijacking of your very thoughts. And, I can show this to people quite often. I do it just for fun, and people get completely disturbed by the fact that I can create a thought form that they think is theirs, and I write it down on a piece of paper, and then I hand it to them, and they go, that's how quickly this stuff can go south. That's how quickly. So, James's mission to reveal and explore and reveal the true nature of this guiding, this lower frequency, lower what that has been attempting to commandeer our attention, our consciousness for, throughout human history, but specifically the last 100 years, has been at a proportion that is like, it's on steroids. And as James said, if we don't stand up and be counted, literally, like the song says, we're going to wake up, because people dismiss. They're like, oh, that's going to be that's ages away. That's 10, 20, 30 years away. Don't worry about it. People were saying the same thing about the book 1984. When 1984 came and left, they're like, it never happened. And so you keep reading this, fiction, and now they're like, holy crap, that book is my reality. I am living it right now. But it was supposed to happen then, and then the predictions continue, whether it's a certain point in history, and people are like, there's all this, crying wolf, and nothing's taking place, yet the frog is being boiled all so slowly, and it's trickling down from generation to generation to where, people are having this idea that, someone who happens to be commandeering the audience or the attention of a lot of people right now within the news media, someone like P. Diddy is some profound, like, prophet, musician, and genius in so many expressions of the word. And, everything of his whole infrastructure of his career and everything that was created was fueled by something else. And we're starting to see that quite clearly, for only one reason, is because they want you to see it. So what is the purpose of people seeing this in the news media, other than you're getting another heads up of what has already taken place, and this is another version of it, and the idea that this was nothing more than a bad story or a myth is becoming quite tangible and real, that this is how they operate. And these dark energies, and I'll be very clear, being in the space that I've been as a priest for so many decades, and within the Chinese culture, we're very superstitious. So I understand that. So there's a much deeper level. I've come across all types of attempts of low-level magic, in my opinion. People will call it black magic, all that kind of stuff. Things outside of Thailand, Brazil. There's some really not so nice people that are being commandeered with their very thoughts, feelings, and emotions, and they're doing things that are very Hollywood-esque, very Hollywood-like. And so, don't dismiss it. You're being desensitized by these Hollywood movies to be like, it's just a movie. It's just a fantasy. It's not real. These things aren't possible. Listen, the foundations of distant healing will tell you everything you need to know. If I can heal someone from 1,000,000 miles away with my intention alone, then you can, with the polarizing effects of duality, there are other things that people can do. And so it all then comes back to the depth of your belief system. You referred to the Nazis. That was a playbook that was hideous, that was rolled out literally in the last 4 years. Surrender your neighbor. Anyone that you see that will not be performing the acts that are in accordance with the blah, 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 let us know. We will punish them appropriately. What do you think some of the people that are still orchestrating this stuff right now, that are in positions of power, that are in the same circles that James is talking about, Bill Gates, Soros, all these things, they're all, that guy, literally, it took me to realize the sobering effects that one of his the thing that saved his life was he was an informant for the Nazis. And some of the first people he threw into the Nazis were his parents. Do we want to forget and let history, it's like the fundamentals. When James and I were in school, we wanted to learn about world history. It was available to us. It's not available anymore. You go to school and that has been deconstructed to practically nothing. All of that was a lie. All of it was face. It was a BS. And, it's all about oppression. And now the race that was oppressed the most within human history is now going to prevail as the dominant force and the control of all things. Yet another puppet mastery. Look over here, look over here. I mean, it's got nothing to do with righting wrongs. But, are we going to pay for that now? Something that happened hundreds of years ago, that has been reformed as an idea that, humans all need to be treated the same. Now, that is fundamentally the sort of baseline of how we perceive things within this country and most of the world. But quite frankly, right now, slavery is being performed to produce things like this, and you want to turn a blind eye. You want to finance this, and I'm clearly a contributor. But the reality is this whole technocrat overlord position is being funded and financed and sold using humans and the sacrifice of that energy to create this. And we should have known this decades ago, when someone can produce something for 2 cents that takes a more developed country 100 times that amount, because we have to satisfy the needs of the person that's creating it. And I mean, it just gets crazy. But I'm going to stop right now. You go ahead.
Mustafa Suleiman, talking about AI, explained the need for a personal interface with the system. That he did a talk a couple of days ago, that you need a personal interface because everything you do will be mediated by the artificial intelligence. So this is the personal interface you have in front of you, and that will be enforced upon you. So everything you do, your sense of reality is shortly. This is what the AI people are telling us. The people that deep mind and all that kind of stuff. You will have no choice, and of course, every single instrument has been externalized into systems, been taken out of social context. There is no social context. Instead, there is no alternative. You will be forced into this system. We're nearly there. So people have gone on with that. Again, there's a certain point at which the choices will have to be made, that there will be no going back. In relation to mind control, when you said distance, it's another example. Good distance healing and distant interference. They now have the technology to remotely control humans. It's clear. It's there in the patents. It's there in the technology. It's there in the literature. So they can have things in certain parts of your brain and they can induce the things. That's what the objective is. So they can make people do anything. They can take externally their volition. That's not speculation, conspiracy. It's in the patents. It's in the literature. It's in the scientific literature. There's books of you can be remotely controlled, and all is needed now is carbon nanotubes, etc., and things that can be graphene, graphite, graphene oxide can be stuck inside your head. You don't know it's in there, and you can. That's clear. It's very, very cheap. It's extensive, and when people talking about we don't know. The things they're putting in the sky, which they're denying that anyone can see, but a blind man could see. They could be, those things could be in the sky. The point is, we've given over to secret forces the ability to make these decisions, and they're not accountable. Even the president of the United States is not privy to the policies of certain groups. That can't be right, as we've been warned about by earlier presidents who are fearful of the military-industrial complex. There's a lot of obviously there's a lot of propaganda against the Catholic Church. I'm just giving the example of the contrast. What happened in the 50s and 60s and all this and terrible stuff. And I understand that. But at the same time, in the last year, there's 3 articles at least about the disappearance of children today, up to a rate of 20 a month from the government children's homes today. So all the people, people going on that what happened 50 years ago, they're living in a community where the government they're paying taxes to is overseeing a situation with massive unaccountability and children coming in and being brought in from places and disappearing, and reports of them ending up in brothels in Ireland. So this is on you folks. I mean, when you're going on about all this historic stuff and you're being, repeating about all this stuff, look at what your newspapers are reporting is going on in the country. It's a small country. You're responsible for it. So don't go, people are it's very easy to do this kind of vicarious, sympathy about how they feel for all these kind of things in the past. You're creating the conditions, or you're involved in the conditions for something that's going on in your community, according to the reports of your community from the mainstream media. It's unbelievable. In relation to the remote control, I did talk at a conference at Penn State University and have a beer with Wade Davis on a few games of pool, and his job as an explorer with National Geographic, and he also wrote the books about zombies and studied the zombies and the phenomenon of zombies and the possession of people through chemicals in Haiti, and that's well established. And he went to see and put forward a theory of why that was done, and it's well known that you could use chemicals from puffer fish and things to simulate different states in the body, including death, so they could come back to life. So the neurotoxins that could be utilized. That was just a little point. But in relation to the vision of the future, it was this is what C.S. Lewis was, again, to talk to my Protestant friends in relation to a vision of the future. And C.S. Lewis is very much respected in relation to his standard rearticulation of the meaning of Christian belief, not just to Protestants, but to all Christians and to other people. And again, reflecting in a perennial philosophy context. But in that hideous strength, we have a group of occult scientists, and this is creepy. The anagram for the name is NICE, okay? And NICE is the name of the National Institute of Clinical Excellence, whatever, now in Britain, that investigates medical research. And the same, it's a bit frightening. He has this in the 1940s in his book. He also has, or there's another little coincidence like that. SAGE was the name of the committee that ran all this recent health thing in Britain, all that, the campaign to close down things. SAGE in Britain, that was the anagram. SAGE was the nickname of J.D. Bernal, this man that thought that, and nobody noticed the connection. SAGE is a direct reference to this man that said we would live in, it's remarkable. And I said at the time about the modeling, I don't know much about mathematics, but I can tell that these models are ridiculous. And I was talking to people who are world experts in some of these statistics and all that kind of stuff. So they have no excuse for keeping their mouth shut when they see ridiculous figures from people that have produced ridiculous figures in the past, and then they say that it's scientific. But C.S. Lewis has this organization being involved in occult things, being involved in connection with these aliens in the book, the scientist people, and being possessed and having a head that communicates with these aliens. And C.S. Lewis was talking about Scientocracy. In the context of his understanding of these things, he also has the reappearance of Merlin, the figure Merlin. It's quite interesting because so when some Christians are saying, "Oh, all this stuff is wrong," C.S. Lewis was implying that there would be some recuperation of the ancient spirits of Britain in the next phase to deal with these things. It wouldn't be just the mainstream Christian belief, but there would be some reactivation. For him, it was Merlin. So Merlin appears and fights in this, what you call the fairy story for adults. And remember that J.R. Tolkien, who used to go to the Latin Mass every day, who was a very strict Catholic, it was him that conceived of this incredible world because it was very, very important. They saw what was happening. They didn't say it's just this narrow answer. They said we really have to see the totality and be open to be able to discuss or interpret or use these symbols or whatever, the whole range of this weird world in the focus against, in the fight against the machine, or what C.S. Lewis called as the Scientocracy. So that's what they were doing. They knew the battle was coming. A lot of the motifs are about the future, not about the Nazis as people thought. They're about the future. They set out together to write a series of stories that would embed things. And I think also that they were in Oxford and Cambridge and they knew what was happening. They were hearing things, they're involved in associations. So they're leaving clues about the future. And the oppositional force, the resistance force, is a force which is spiritual for both them, Christian, but also the indigenous thing is incredibly important. They draw on all the traditions and they tell you about these demonic forces that are coming. And that's why you have Sauron and all those figures that are representative of them. And the ring is a classic symbol of power and technological power and the possession. It's all there. They saw what was coming. They knew what was coming. He knew what was coming through technology. They'd both been in the First World War. They both saw what was happening, and they both saw the same force ahead. Now, last point. Sweden was a neutral country when I came here, and Ireland was a neutral country. Now it's not. So now, we're very close at the top to Russia. Now you're put on the front line. You see what the Western powers have done. They're very, very good at creating wars. They're heavily involved in the creating of the conditions for the war in Ukraine. Now there's the possibility of extension to Georgia, Sweden, Finland, etc. And the people who years, opposed NATO for years, just went along with it, just no problem, and ended up supporting groups that are supposedly totally antithetical to what they believe in. It's all full steam ahead. The U.S. government's given loads of money again to further the war in Ukraine, to try and have a deeper war. Where all this leads to worldwide war, which brings in this condition. The elites won't be fighting. They won't be sending their children. They have their underground bases. They're ready. They're moving off to different places around the world to escape what they know they're creating, getting ready to go to the into space in the future if they need be, if they destroy so much of the planet. So it's all full steam ahead. So we have to present an analysis. So either people know they're going on a path to damnation or not. They're saying, no, I'm not going that way. I'm saving my eternal soul. And I'm going to try and convince other people of good nature that, like the hobbits against all the thing. The call is there. They embedded these stories to help us to understand, to point towards the good against remarkably bleak situations that are not merely fantastical, but are about the world in which we live in.
Whoa. It is. It's sort of like painting the picture, microdosing the masses through this lens that is, a universal form of entertainment. They call it movies. And that media is the best way to disseminate this information and bleed it into all states of mind, all generations, and keep handing it down, and so that it becomes more and more integrated into their very knowing. So then it's like, well, what do you care about social media? It doesn't matter. They're checking anyway. They already know. They're all listening to everything we're saying. What's the big deal? That's really was the mentality of most of the people that I knew when social media first turned up. They're like, you're a conspirator. You're way too up in your head. You're thinking way too much about this. I'm like, really? And so you watch it sort of blossom and unfold through all these tools and through all these incredible contributors to human history. And they were all transmitting it. This all really comes back to another level of channeling. They're literally channeling the information, and they're putting it down and transcribing it into their novels, into their theories, into their books. And it's really formed as reality. Now, we could take it on two sides of this, right? We can take it on the side of this is through the consensus and forming of these ideas that are now self-fulfilling prophecies. Are they held on the idea of the manifestation of the group of people that have continued to give it life through our thought processes, through the experience of how the mind is manipulated? Or is it just another force that you and I are far more in a belief system of, which is opposing to a higher resonance that has a direct effect of manipulating your mind? So a lot of people will be like, oh, well, you think about it and it's in the movies, that's why it's been created. Or, well, but it still comes back to a direct source of where is this coming from? Or more commonly, how are we getting here? And, as Bob Monroe called it, the loosh, something greater, this nature of energy that is taking over or attempting to throughout human history, throughout all religious beliefs, throughout all belief systems. There has been an acknowledgement of these two opposing energies. Now within Taoism, we embrace light and darkness, knowing they're two of the same. Yet dark, as opposed to light being yin and yang, is not the same as darkness as evil. That's a whole different ballgame. We ain't talking about that, but most people will dismiss it that way. But generally speaking, Taoists look at yin and yang as one. And so that's where some people will get deluded and sort of like, well, you don't believe in this low frequency. Oh, I believe it. I've been exposed to it in my natural born life for 30 years. And in past lives, many past lives leading up to this one, it's very real. But now it depends on how is that person being commandeered? How are the masses being commandeered? And what is giving, what is it? What was the person's name? Shelley. Who was it? Shelley Frank. Who was the person who wrote Frankenstein?
Yeah, Mary Shelley. Yeah.
Mary Shelley is like, it's alive. Again, that premise, that understanding is very much the fundamentals of how you make something grow or materialize something with your attention intention. So this is then now being validation of the very messaging that you've been saying throughout this whole conversation, which is we're being commandeered to use this source energy to manifest the very outcome that they're looking for. Because, that's how I do group healing, right? So if anyone wants to understand how group healing works is, I've had up to 1,000 people at one time, and I will connect all of them together. And all their intentions is they're coming in, they've got their knee hurt, they've got cancer, they've got a headache, they're emotionally distressed. Every single person that is contributing and a part of that group healing is for the betterment of all. And what comes out of it is a profound healing for everyone. May come in the feeling of mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, it's happening. And of course, it's happening at the spiritual level, that's no doubt, but it will trickle down into other representations of that, depending upon the individual. But it's connecting people. And it's so easy to do it. It's so easy to connect people. And this comes back to understanding how your thoughts are being commandeered. All thoughts of your mind are not yours. And so, again, I don't want to speak on this as if I'm fear-mongering, because I'm not. I don't subscribe to it. I don't promote it. That's not the messaging and how I teach people. But there needs to be a sobering awareness, because Lao Tzu will always say this: the first point of healing is being accountable for your behavior. Straight up. And there are stages of healing, and he refers to it. First, it is consciousness, concept consciousness, knowing, unconscious knowing, then being one with all things. And so that is a stage of awareness, of awakening, of reuniting yourself with the true nature of who you are. And that commandeering of it through thoughts, feelings, and emotions is what we're speaking of, James and I. But it's not a fear-based thing. It's once you're aware, you can literally make it known and create the parameters and the actual distance that you want to be from this very energy, if you know it exists. If you don't know it exists, you don't understand why you decide to have like 3 beers, the next minute you're punching your wife's face in. And you're like, what? Why is that? Well, it's the alcohol. You're an asshole anyway. So when you drink, you're just a bigger asshole. Oh, no. You need to listen. You need to listen to something greater. And then the remorse and the regret is when you sober up to who you really are. And then, of course, you get commandeered again. And all of a sudden, I'm a little loose. I'm feeling a little good. You got a little mouthy. Where's my remote control for my TV? Boom. And all of a sudden, you're commandeered again. So you're allowing a certain degree of control over your very action. And people keep talking about this willpower, willpower, willpower. You have no willpower until otherwise noted. You have to be leveled up. You have to understand that there is these other elements that are taking place. So until then, you're going to be commandeered. The second you hear this conversation, you will activate your willpower at a level you've never seen before. But it's about understanding the very things that are moving in and out of your perception of reality. And you can carve it out. That's why I always stress this. I reiterate this. I speak on it over and over and over again. You must have a method. You must have a method of understanding to develop your consciousness, your awareness. And that comes from religion. That comes from spirituality. That comes from just a belief system. Just anything. Just believe in something other than there is nothing. And that's a good start. But then you have conversations like the one we're having today, and people's minds are being melted a minute by minute basis with the revealing of the information that we're sharing with them. What are your thoughts on that?
We must delouse I didn't agree. I was going to say about the Gnostic thing when I was listening to the conversation about this world. You can't come to a situation, I believe, where you say, oh, the Gnostic view, or an aspect of the Gnostic view, this is a prison planet and we're all kind of, it's inherently bad. It's not inherently bad. That's not what the traditions say. They say the opposite. And but you can be led to, you can superimpose a prison on that, and that can be bad. But the thing itself is not inherently. It's what we do with it. It's down to our choice. It's down to whether we choose to exert our potential or not. Whether we choose not to exert our inherent divine Tao or God-given nature whether we activate that, because that's very, very powerful, and we know that from history. So I don't agree with this idea. Oh, everything's bad. No, that's not what. And so a lot of people have that view. A lot of people say, "Oh, everything's bad. The whole thing. What a terrible play." It's becoming quite. I notice it common in people like David Icke, although he says we're infinite consciousness. In the last couple of years, he's saying, "Oh, it's I understand he's got treated, being excluded from countries, not being able to talk. I understand he's had a terrible time, but it doesn't. Everything is not bad. Their potential is not bad. This is not this strong Gnostic view that says, oh, this is just a bad copy of that's a misunderstanding, in my view, of of even what's there. And I don't think people should begin to see, well, they shouldn't see themselves as anything less than the divinely inspired potential. And they shouldn't be talked out about that. And they shouldn't be talked out by by people that are critical of the system. There's a fear is one thing, but there's a nihilism which they've been working on for a long, long time, to creating a meaninglessness, which is devastating, because as Viktor Frankl talked about, the people that survive in the concentration camps are people that have a sense of meaning. And we can go deeper on that. That's not just an intellectual construct. Generally, we're talking about people that have some kind of spiritual sense, some sense that there is something bigger than this, that the problem is limited, even whatever horrendous way it happens. So not only do I urge people not to be dispirited, my argument is that the problems we have are becoming because we're dispirited and demoralized. It's an argument in favor of the spirit, of the soul, of correspondence with nature, of the Tao. In my case, coming from a Catholic background, a Christian background, that's a tradition that it provides answers to some of these. Whatever tradition people have, now is the time to draw on them and apply them, and to see the world, clearly. So absolutely, and I not to be dispirited. And there's also that it's as we talked about on the cross, the robber saying, like, you prove to me. You have to come out of you have to be the puppy that comes out of the kennel. You have to come out. You have to meet the forces of the world. C.S. Lewis did it again in his last book, regarded as one of his best books, Till We Have Faces, and based on a retelling of Greek myths. And he makes a very important point about this, that the idea is in this. And if anyone hasn't read it before, I don't think it'd be a spoiler alert. It's in the name. Is that you cannot meet the gods until you have a face, and in this context, I mean the spiritual face. So if you don't assert your spirituality, they cannot see you. It's a deep idea. So in order to, in Christian terms, they say, "Come out ye from among them," and all that. You have to commit yourself. In the hero's journey in Joseph Campbell, you have to commit yourself to the journey. You have to go on the journey. You have to answer the call. You have to get on the path, and then the things start happening. In the 10 ox or the 10 bulls story in the Zen, which I think is a great teaching, the guy in 10 stages that explains the spiritual journey. First, he sees a footprint, and he has to follow it. He has to go and look, and then he goes and finds the ox, and then he tries to master the ox or the bull, and then he's able to ride the bull, and then he transcends the bull, and then he transcends the bull on himself, and then he ends up in the end back to where he started, with more dust laden, but understanding about the control of the ego and control of the outside world. But you have to set off on a journey. So that's critical. But saying, "Oh, it's all," because it may seem easy, but it's not easy. It won't be easy if you give up on the thing. I don't want to say anything that's disillusioning. And you've from your example, your poignant example earlier on about your friends, it's not me that's spreading the disillusionment. There's all these guys out there that want to take your soul. I'm arguing in favor of your soul. The fact that I'm saying that these things have consequences for you and our society and the world, is, as far as I can see, what's evidenced from many sources, not just me imagining it. From the literature, I try and document people that have studied, use many views, many pieces of evidence from many disciplines to explain this process from a historical perspective, explain the psychological elements and the political elements and the institutional elements and intelligence elements and the whole lot. It's there. So, but that comes from a place. I'd rather be like one of the great benefits. You're talking about the children earlier on. One of the greatest gifts in my life was being able to stay at home with the kids. I abandoned the academic world. I left it all behind. I burned my bridges. I had very, very good contacts around the world. I just said bye bye, and I knew that I couldn't maintain contact, even though it was great. My career was going very well. I could travel around the world and work in many beautiful places. If I had wanted to continue doing that, I left it. So you're up there in some senses. Oh, what do you do? Oh, yeah, I do the United Nations, blah, 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 blah. And then what do you do? Well, I'm looking after my kids. So what was very liberating was this humility, because people treat you differently if they see you don't have status. I found that very, very liberating, and I found it great to be able to focus my attention on children and enter into a children's world, me again. And it was not thinking about yourself, as you well know, is a brilliant way to develop your intuition, because then you become open. And in fact, we were going. I've mentioned this in a book prologue or preface when I was talking about Jeffrey Mishlove and New Thinking Aloud, and a series of interviews that they published. So in the preface, I was explaining that I looked after the kids, and I didn't generally. We didn't go to school or play groups. I only let them go to play groups and after a bit. I didn't want them going too early because people throw their kids in. It's very easy and acceptable here. I wanted them to have time, whether it was me or my wife. But I decided, because her career was going grand, I decided to stay out, and it was fantastic. Everyone tells you it's terrible, it's lonely, it's bored. I had a great time. It was heavenly. So we then, just for socialization, because there's no kids at home, go to a kind of parents cooperative. But would always be late because we'd be playing on the way, because I'd be doing my painting and writing. So, and they didn't really like when you're late, even though it was cooperative. So we were one morning going by there's a place between an old jail, which is a cultural place, and the graveyard, and lovely apple blossoms. So, of course, we were climbing in them, having a great time and enjoying it. And I left her in, the kid, and we had a fantastic time. And as I was walking home, I got that line that came into my head. There's been a certain failure of spiritual evolution. I said, I didn't think that line up. Where did that come from? And I got another line about the way, and another line about, and I began, and they came in 17 syllables, like a haiku. So I paid attention to any line that I'd count if it came in, but most of them I added to it. But the thing, I said, I wasn't thinking about these things at the time I was painting. Of course, I had done in the past, but in recent years, I hadn't been thinking about it. I'd been doing other things. I'd been engaged in the university, engaged with the children, engaged. This came out of the blue, although it's not that I wasn't disposed towards these things. Just the lines literally came out of the blue. I didn't invent that. So I began to reflect on that the failure of spiritual evolution as the basis of all the problem, and I began to work on that and come to the conclusion that yes, it's corroborated, and that was in the mystical accord explaining this thing that everybody has. They get mixed up between esoteric and mystical, The mystical thing is, for me, is the inherent capacity in every individual to unite with these forces. So it's the thing that makes religion. It's the thing that has to survive through religion. It's the thing that structured religion often opposes. But I mean, the Catholic Church, for example, they have vast documentation about people flying, about remote viewing, about people doing amazing miracles, gone through rigorous things. So they're not against it. They know that these things exist. But that was also made me think about this phenomenon. It's not that I didn't have mystical experience before, but I was saying it was so clear that this thing came on the wind through the apple blossoms, or whatever blossoms they were, the fruit trees. Very beautiful, beautiful white blossoms and pink blossoms. So that came, and I was saying, well, I know I didn't make that line. It didn't come from my subconscious. It was unexpected. Of course, that argument could be made, just projected, but it was too external. It wasn't that I didn't agree with it or it didn't reflect my views in some way, but its construction was unconstructed. And that made me, okay, well, what's this and where is this coming from? And an investigation. And I went back again from the start, looking at mysticism, spirituality, the psychology of it, the literature, the texts again in terms in which, after I had written them down, what this text about the true self, the self, false self, etc., and matching that with the traditions, and you can see it, every pattern is there. It's there in Patanjali, it's there in the Vedanta, it's there in Tao, it's there in Christianity. If you look for it, the same pattern. It's inscribed upon us. It is written in us. The divine forces has written that God code, the Tao code in us. And that's why people perceive the same things across all cultures when you look through it. So everyone has that mystical capacity. The esoteric is an element of it, but by definition, the esoteric usually is associated with kind of elite practices that you find in different traditions. But also esoteric reflecting what's not exoteric, the main, what people want to call it, dogma. So these things are very, very real. These things are powerful. And even John Lilly talked about that force, the intervention force. The Virgin Mary and the Garabandal has said there will be an intervention, that everybody is going to experience an illumination of consciousness. Now, this is one which is not approved by the church, but it wouldn't surprise me. There will be positive interventions as well. There are forces in the universe which are intervening positively as well. So I've called it the empire of scientism, which has a regime of the made mind to describe this system. So this is a thing that's prefigured in Star Wars and all. They were talking about. It's also prefigured in The Dark Crystal by Jim Henson. Yeah. So I saw that years ago and said, well, what's this about? I wasn't paying attention to it. And then I went back and, and studied it. And he had a vision. He had a vision about this, the taking over by a militaristic, industrial, heartless force of the place, and they were set up. So all these kind of animal, horrible-looking creatures, all demonic, bird-like things. They represent actually figures from Babylon that appeared in some of the debates you probably heard about all this, stuff that we're talking, emerald tablets and all that. So there's these militaristic guys, and they're at the final stage where they're going to take over the world. And there's a mystic group, and the mystic group are kind of soft and nice, and they do their gentle stuff, and they're kind, but they're ineffective. The mystics are ineffective. So these guys are nearly going to take over the world. And there's a story in between. And again, spoiler alert for anyone who watches it. And Crystal is critical on this. In the end, and what Jim Henson is suggesting, that the solution is through the unification of them, because they're two split parts of the nature that were split apart as the crystal was split apart. So the resolution is when they come back together, the mystical element and this other element. It's a profound actual observation, and he was making a profound observation, which will be consistent as well with that unification element. Is why I say we have to persuade the opposite side. We have to persuade the people that there's a mistake, that it's wrong, that they will lose out, that children will lose out, that they will lose out on their soul as well. We don't have to approach this thing in an utterly condemnatory way, and it will be. So, but those stories are the same. The premonitions deeply about what's going on, and the artists often were forewarning us or trying to indicate something which was radically wrong. So, by the same token, the criticism of the mystics is, you can sit there all day and do nothing and not actually seek to unite with the opposing force. And if you have genuine, all-encompassing mystical thing in a proper sense of the Tao, you're going to want to accommodate the opposing force, and it will be from there that the balance will be achieved.
Wow. Yeah, it does. It's sort of, I was going to mention that there was also this sort of undertone through time, as I've noticed over the last several decades, where people are going, well, it's all the same. Really, you look across all platforms, it's the same. Well, the messaging is the same, but I think it's really important that people to value where it's coming from, to value that if it's Buddha, it's Buddha. If it's God, it's God. If it's Tao, it's Tao, rather than, hey, it's all the same. See, you got the three guys, you got the higher self of knowing, you've got this foundation, you got the 12. I mean, and it becomes sort of, and then all of a sudden you get it bleeding into this sort of mishmash.
Yes, yeah.
Now
yeah.
it's fragmented. Now the actual belief system that was founded on, Christianity, Catholicism, Judaism, Taoism is fragmented, and it's not the pure offering that initially was given. And I think that is problematic for people to dismiss that there are, yes, James and I agree, there is a fundamental universal messaging that across all methods, all belief systems. Yet it's so important to nourish and value how it was created. Where did that messaging come from? And the more that you embody that, the more you value that, the more you recreate that, the more you make it the very expression of who you are, is where we stay strong. We stand tall. We are one. All is one, one is all. It's when you become fragmented and you become isolated and you become separate, and then you believe you are the material sort of notion and messaging and thoughts that you are, separate, because it's that double sort of like head screw. It's like, but didn't you just say we need to be one and we're all? Listen, there's several things that are going on here, but one is being able to value the expression of humanity and human beings in of themselves as this incredible expression of the universe, of Tao, of God, and then the spiritual connection that you are having, that I guess the word would be honors that and embodies that and solidifies that, and that you don't have to be separate from that, because everyone looks at AI. It's like, holy moly, AI just hit a button and it does everything for you, and you don't have to think anymore. And then all of a sudden it's going to tell you what's right or wrong, or up or down, or in or out, and you're not experiencing anything. You're not embodying that experience, that humanness, and then realizing that the true connection you have with all things is that very oneness, the present moment, and the simplicity of all the present moment.
Yeah.
My goodness, we have definitely gone on an incredible journey today, my friend. I'm honestly, if we didn't have any more commitments, I think I might disappear with you for a couple of months. Maybe that's
Yeah,
still enough.
I hope we didn't, or I didn't, bring your audience into too dark places from my
No, no, no.
view, but
You know,
we can't avoid them, and we have to look them in the eye. And but just to say on a positive note, um, all the traditions, in my view, vindicates the triumph in the end. In if you want, in Christian terms, it's right at the start. It's the woman who will crush the snake. The Nothing against snakes, but this is the symbol that's used. It will be defeated. The power of, again, in Christian terms or Marian terms, the immaculate heart or whatever, meaning the open heart or pure light in Buddhist term, will overpower. So what the choice is people is whether which path they're going. There's clear choice coming. You can go down a slow descent into a materialist hell, actually, or we can continue to evolve, fulfilling our potential. So we have that choice, and that will triumph in the end. I'm certain about that. There will be a lot of difficulty. It's not going to be easy, but for all you have to do is focus on moving towards the good, the true, and the beautiful, whatever way you want. But these are the things that we're told about for a long period of time. And for me, it involves the light, understanding the darkness as well, and understanding what that is and the different variations of that. But in relation to uh, opposition, to all these forces that we're talking about, they're all embodied in ideas of fallen angels or people who have rejected God. Now, C.S. Lewis would say they've rejected the Tao, because they have said, we are bigger than this. There's no man, no woman, no Jesus, not Jesus, no man, no woman, no figure um, who is bigger than the totality, who can project themselves against the good forces, say, in Jesus on the other side, or the or God, or whoever way you want to conceive, or the Buddha, or in the Taoist context, with all the
three pure,
cosmology and the and the
pure ones.
more.
Yeah, the three pure ones are the gateway. They're basically the evolution of the cosmos. So
Yes,
supreme purity is the light, jade purity
yeah,
is the information, and the highest
yeah.
purity is the energy.
Yeah. So the this triune thing is there, as we know, and the Trinity and the various things in the Indian philosophy. So let's find the similarities, and we can't find in the detail. Let's do it in the orientation of our heart in the Sufi way, recognizing that each individual has, as Surawardi talked about, the illuminationist in the 12th century, about each person has a guardian angel, or, well, he said, a man or woman of light which exists. It's their spirit, and we connect with this, and this connects with a higher principle. But we orientate ourselves towards the North Pole, which is in ourselves. It's the orientation, which is, and it's the same thing. The Taoism is orientation. So uh, let's be positive. I am positive. I'm very enthusiastic. I'm not depressed. I'm not nihilistic. Nothing I see puts me down. Of course, I don't want to see people suffering, but there's only certain things you can control, and you can work to reduce things. But we have to be the positive force, contribute towards the positive force, make the mystic murmuration, be exemplars, act out the things, be brave, be courageous, open ourselves up to it. That's what we have to do.
Amen to that, brother. I don't know. I don't have. I couldn't even possibly end with anything more profound than what you just did. What you just said. I want to say that that is a collective. That's something that we really embody on this channel, which is the empowerment of you knowing about how the true connection with your higher expression of who you are, being one with all things, the Tao, God, Buddha, universe.
Here, I have a criticism. Here. I'm not happy. My criticism is that I know you're giving special privilege to other guests by asking them about consciousness, and you never asked me.
I was about to. Don't you worry. I wasn't done.
You said you were able.
Look at you. You're already an OG. You're an OG, James. Yeah.
I have to pay attention. Yeah, I pay attention to what you're doing.
Yeah, so that was coming. And so I am going to put all the access that anyone and everyone can have to James's books and social media, website, wherever you can get a hold of James. I know you may not want a bunch of people on your doorstep picking your brain, but I'm already giving you an invitation that we need to revisit this conversation to new heights in the very near future, and you are always welcome. And I look forward to potentially having you commandeer a flight over here with your family, and you have a family that welcomes you and your family at any point out here in little sunny Las Vegas.
No, it's very kind of you. I might, when some of the MMA fights, we didn't get around to talking about sport, which is another drug, although, and also it's funny that the word sport is quite close to spirit. People don't know this, and how powerful sport has become. I think it's another substitute. Again, a lot of them from the British Empire, all the rules, all decided on a rules-based system. A lot of them come from Britain, the British Empire. Although I have to admit, one of my vices is that I do like boxing and MMA. I've always been interested in those things.
Well, you and I are very, very much in the same vein. We could be doppelgangers, I'm thinking, because I really, truly, boxing is my all-time favorite sport. I may not be very popular, but I've never stepped away from still claiming Mike Tyson is the greatest boxer in history. Now, a lot of people are like, he's horrible, he's evil, he's this. I'm not talking about his personality. I'm talking about what he has achieved as a boxer. And that right now, we're about to see that in history. You're about to witness an interesting sort of little bout that he's having with some YouTuber. And this YouTuber is going to get a refreshing realization that you're boxing someone who might be 58 years old, but was, in my opinion, the best boxer ever. And he's probably going to decimate this poor 27-year-old YouTuber due to the fact that fear will find you no matter what. And if you have any doubt, this is like being a psychic or a medium when it comes to sports, especially when it comes to MMA or boxing. They're incredible empaths, and they intune themselves to being able to manipulate their opponent very quickly. And then you see shades of this from interesting characters that I'm not so impressed with that I used to really like, people like Arnold Schwarzenegger. But the fundamentals of that are very simple, right down to something like pumping iron, where he was like already defeating his opponent in the very psychological tricks and methods of getting inside their head before they were on the stage. And this is going on all the time. This is like another facet of it. We're like talking about all this stuff now. From your expression, I'm wondering who do you consider one of the best boxers in the world, or the best?
Well, here, you're after opening up another. Who beat Jack Dempsey twice? The question. Jack Dempsey was beaten as nearly 1926, 1927. Jack Dempsey is Mike Tyson's hero.
Oh, Mike
Tyson.
Yeah.
So in 1926 and 1927, Jack Dempsey fought the world heavyweight, and he was beaten by the same boxer. When they fought in Chicago, now think about this, in 1927, there was between 120 and 130,000 people came to see them in Soldier Fields. It was only being surpassed for a boxing match and won in Mexico, although there's debate about how many people were there. So think of it, 120,000 or 130,000 people went to see two men fight in soldier fields in Chicago. Al Capone bet on Dempsey. All the movie stars were around. One of these in 26 or 27, one of the first world heavyweight fights broadcast on radio. 10 people got heart attacks listening and died during the thing. It was broadcast. There was crowds in South America, around the world, army bases listening. It was one of the most exciting things. Again, people have short memory. The person that beat Jack Dempsey twice was a Marine. He also retired after one defense, and he married a millionairess, and who was from the Carnegie family. So that boxer was christened James Tunney. It was Gene Tunney. He was beaten once in his career by a boxer called Harry Greb, and he won. There's different recordings of the amount of fights. It's something between at least 68, possibly 80 fights, and was beaten once. And of course, people know nothing about he.
I'm going
in
to check.
relation to he in relation to age. He sparred James Corbett when James Corbett was 62, and Corbett was very good. And Gene Tunney, he became a commander in the U.S. Navy in charge of physical fitness. I have met his son because Gene Tunney's father came from Mayo, so they're distant relations who came from. So some of these figures we forget about, and studying these figures, he became. I have to tell you this last bit. And I talked to his son, is a very interesting man as well. And of course, the family became very, very. He was the big guy. Gene Tunney was the big guy. Of course, people forget about this. He was the film star, the movie star. He wasn't well liked by the public because he read books. They didn't like him as much as Jack Dempsey. They identified with Jack Dempsey, and they thought he was too kind of snobby because he read books. After he won the World Heavyweight Champion, he even gave a lecture on Shakespeare at Yale. And, this is not what a boxer should be doing. In fact, in the reporting coming up to the fight in Chicago, there was a headline in the paper by the sports thing that says Tunney is beat because he saw Gene Tunney reading a book, and it meant that he was soft. And Tunney had studied literature and applied it to his boxing technique. He was one of the first people that used film in relation to his opponents. So he studied everything. He studied geometries for years. He studied boxer to understand what tells they have. He fought a guy who was a very good boxer, and he waited for 6 rounds until he moved his left foot back an inch, and he knew what punch to throw then because he had studied what his reactions were. So his knowledge of the enemy was a critical part in relation to his thing. His son reminded me, and when he came to do a talk in Dublin, that before the fight with Dempsey, he trained running backwards. So he'd do 3 miles running backwards every day. In the second fight, he was knocked down. It's a famous fight of the long count. It was the only time he was knocked down in his career, and all those things. And Dempsey didn't go back to the neutral corner that his team had said that they would go back to. So Tunney was down. There's debate about whether he was out. He wasn't. He was just he was using the count, and he got up and won the fight. But for the next round, he backpedaled. So he applied that running backwards thing to be able to survive in the thing. So this time he also charged people to go and see him sparring. All that stuff is there. People have forgotten about it. 1920 or 2027 will be the anniversary of that fight. It's one of the greatest fights. Of course, people don't know about these things anymore. All the films there, and because they were very well known, they would have been one of the well-known families, like in the Irish American thing, like the Kennedys. In fact, Gene Tunney advised the Kennedys about getting a sauna into their house and things like this. So when I'm talking to his son, I'm saying you must have met, and he's telling me he knows all the Kennedys and telling me what they were like, and his brother was roommate, of course, Ted, all this very, very interesting stuff. So that was the son of a longshoreman in New York, that a poor Irish American family, who used his mind to apply to the. So I'm going to throw in an extra little bit just on this in relation to. There's another Tunney fella, actually. I don't know. I can't establish the exact relation, but there's not loads of them came from Ireland. Who was an inspector in the police force in New York, who was fighting against the German agents at the time of the First World War, who were blowing up ships going from New York to Europe. And this was recognized. There's a book called The Dark Invasion of the first Homeland Security in the United States. So the point I just, because of the name, I studied that guy as well. It was interesting. And at the end of it, he's saying, well, why is these subversives, Trotsky, being allowed to go off to Russia? An interesting question. But so he knew there was something up there. But the point is, there are always enemies, there are always opposition, but there are always exemplars to use in relation to the what happened, what's going on. My father was an Irish national champion amateur boxer. I was always interested in that. So when I saw, for example, Conor McGregor in the MMA, first he fought in Sweden. So I saw and said, who's this guy? Nobody in Ireland really knew him, apart people who were MMA. When I asked him, did you know this guy? He said, no. A few months later, they were telling me, have you heard, the same people were saying, have you heard about but what was interesting about him is, he wouldn't have won in Ireland as much as my father had won in his time in boxing, but he's a great boxer. And when I saw him, I said at the time, as soon as I saw him in the first minute, when I saw a clip here in Sweden of him, I said, he's a superstar. And the reason why I said he's a superstar was very, very simple. Because if you saw the way he carried his shoulders, it was unlike your trained boxing doing this. And this, as we know from all the traditions in Taoism, is wrong. Not to have them there, but to have this kind of tension, because this is inconsistent with the softness and so on. So here's McGregor. He has this thing where he calls it dislocating his shoulders. You could see it immediately. He was utterly relaxed, the effortlessness of the pose. So as a counterpuncher, he doesn't react in a thinking way. Opportunities arise and he responds, as he says, his timing beats speed and all. It's a classic application of the spirit of the Tao in that context. Whatever else about whatever criticism in relation to his technique, it's the classic example of a principle that most teachers get wrong in relation to how they train people. Do this, I'm sure I've done it myself plenty of times, whereas really you have to let go, get out of your own way. So I find it a great analogy in relation to understanding the necessary skills of the warrior that have to be applied in relation to the spiritual warrior. And again, in a non-violent context, but anyone that gets into any ring has a degree of bravery and courage. My father, it was very, very interesting, last point on this. My father saw courage in terms of physical courage, facing an enemy physically, what you do. My mother had a different concept of courage. So for both of them, this thing was important. My mother's idea of courage, she really respected people who did their own thing, who didn't care what people thought about them, who had the courage of their convictions to live their own life. And in some ways, the position of women in the society at the time, she didn't perhaps get the opportunity to explore that. But that quality, and it may have been why she was attracted to my father, but that spirit is a different type of courage. It's a moral courage, and it's ultimately more powerful, more significant than all the physical context, than all the machines, and all the things. It's that moral courage to be able to do your thing that you have to do that's relevant, that can contribute to other people, to spirituality, a deep, deep thing. And the last point, remember, when I was small in Ireland, I could go around down the street in suburban Dublin, working class Dublin, a place called Finglas, and there was green fields still. And every now and then the gypsies would come, the travellers, as they're called now, and they would set up camp. They would come with a horse and arrow, go hunting in the fields. Some of them with arrows that they had with their horses, have open fires, live in a way that they had done for hundreds of years. They obviously, as a group on the margins of a society which is stabilizing, there would have been, people, a lot of people, discrimination against, but there was also a long tradition of appreciation in certain things of them. There was in the countryside, there was people that liked them. I know my grandmother and that would have enjoyed them coming, so the stories are always. But out of that milieu, Tyson Fury's father came from, and these a lot of people at the time that would have been begging, poor, high infant mortality. So Tyson Fury's father was born in Ireland. There's debate about. Then they went over to England, and then his son, from that context, becomes the world heavyweight champion and a multi-millionaire in one generation. It's quite a remarkable example of the use of focus and also of spiritual belief, because they're very spiritual. They're very committed to that, and there's not inconsistency in the thing. So yeah, the stories of the individuals in those things are relevant to spiritual warriors, and that's another long conversation we could have.
Yeah, we definitely have to have that. I mean, I agree with you in all that sense. It's like spirit projection is part of like one of the cultivating practices, and then a really, really powerful way to enter into your opponent. And when people take hold of me, I just roll their fascia, and the tighter they hold, the more I enter their physical body and puppeteer them, and they freak out. And they're like, I'm not even doing it. I've got my hands on you, and you're moving me around, and you're just as soft as anything, because that's how you do it. Now, that's in that context. When I go and like puppeteer someone that wasn't my opposing force in a martial setting, no. But is it possible? 1,000%. I mean, that's physical healing. That's what happens. But you need to understand, the harder someone gets, the easier it is to just move them around like a rag. Because
on that point you make about thoughts and feelings and emotions, of course, as people say sometimes about McGregor and that talk and all that he's talking, it's psychological, he's talking to their mind, but he's talking to their body. He's implanting the suggestion so that, of course, this emotion, which will paralyze them by making them tight with the anger, will affect them, their flexibility, and make them unable to move. So he's talking to their nervous system. He's talking to deeper things as opposed to only cognitive things. People get that wrong in relation to that, and he's doing that skill that you're talking about. Yeah.
And I mean, Tyson was doing it unconsciously his whole career, and there was probably a degree where his trainer taught him, but generally speaking, he was just unraveled. Even to his own admission, he was afraid. He's afraid right up until the last minute, but then he turns into something else, and you see that come over him. And it's not necessarily of the highest frequency, but hey, listen, it gets the job done. And I think
I have one more point to come to that.
Yeah. Well, he lost. I'll say one thing. He lost because he gave up. He lost his heart. He lost his passion. He lost everything. That's the only reason he ever lost any fight ever in his career, because he didn't care anymore.
he's a very interesting man, and the humility of him. There's the other boxer, Ken Egan, he explained very good stories from Dublin. He's one of his friends, and uh, I think he was described as the hardest white man by Mike Tyson. He used to train with him, and he said, this fella from Dublin said that Tyson was. He's talked about it again recently in an interview as well, but he has talked about it before. Tyson Fury heard his mother was sick, and he said, "I'll come over to Dublin to see her." And he said, "Well, come over to Dublin to see?" He says, "Yeah, I'll come over to Dublin to see her." And he went over to Dublin. I know he's a big celebrity, and they went to his little house to see his mother because she had cancer, diagnosed with cancer or something, or recovered from something. But anyway, and he said he embraced. Now, the reason why he did that was because his mother used to send Tyson presents when he was training when he was with Gus D'Amato and that, when they were sparring. So she sent a Christmas present, and it'd be something, a kind of working class, person, not loads of money, a bag of crisps and something like that from Ireland. And Tyson Fury, or not, Mike Tyson, said it was the only present he ever got from anyone, and it really affected him. So it's kind of, despite all the things that came out later, when he didn't have there was nobody sending him presents. So he formed a relation. He was always talking, or he formed a relationship with his mother. But these kind of things are kind of a show about the simple things that are very, very effective. Simple acts of kindness. In that context, of course, it's easy after he's famous to send him all the presents and to go and whatever and all that, and to go looking and hanging around. It's not when someone is, a black boy from the ghettos who's fighting in a dirty business with dirty, context to say, well, there's a person there, I'm going to recognize him. So it's quite remarkable. And the last thing I was going to say, I don't know if you saw the interview, the sit down, because this is relevant to what we're talking about, between Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder, where they're discussing spirits before there. So they have their you have to see it. Yeah. I don't understand why it's not more significant, but it's a brilliant little piece. So you have Deontay Wilder, who's 6'7", and Fury 6'9". These are so they call anyone who's below 6'3" small these days. Remarkable in the boxing thing. So these are two very big men, and Wilder was a very dangerous man and being unbeaten. So they're sitting down in this head-to-head where they get them in that format to talk. So Deontay Wilder says to Tyson Fury, he says, "You can't beat me. You can't beat me." And Fury's saying, "Well, what do you mean?" Well, he said, "You can't beat me." And he starts talking in a kind of funny voice and saying, "You can't beat me. I'm indestructible," and repeating a kind of mantra. So Tyson Fury saying, "What are you? Is this your alter ego?" Now Tyson Fury was talking about a kind of masked, a presented figure. Is this your alter ego? He genuinely didn't know what was happening. And he says, "You can't beat me." And he says, what is that I'm talking to now? And Deontay Wilder says, "Well, it's the brown bomber, it's his persona," but implying that it was a real figure, that it was an ancient tribal figure. He says, "Are you telling me that that I'm talking to whatever that spirit in there?" And he continues to validate that. So he says, "I liked you, but I don't like you anymore. I believe in Jesus Christ, and you're never going to beat me because I have the good forces in me, and I'm going to beat it. And I don't believe in this thing. I don't believe in doing this thing and using these forces for." So once you've done that, you're beat. And it's a remarkable, genuine example of not just the physical combat, but also of a spiritual type of thing. It's absolutely remarkable. I can't understand why it hasn't got more attention, but you can see that. Have a look at that, the interaction on the various people have added things onto it, but we look at the original thing itself and the interaction. It is a remarkable evidence of spiritual dimension to this, and this idea of the persona in the warrior and the possession is very, very strong, with a long history, interesting topic as well. So again, proven that what we're talking about is a very, very real thing, and all its elements, and whatever you do, for good, for bad, in relation to opposition, in relation to dealing with opposition, and about the necessity to have an honorable sense of your own spirituality and an honorable sense of other people, and to work together to come to the good outcome. So sorry for going off on that, but I couldn't.
That was amazing. Now I'm going to get to the question.
I can't. I'm looking forward to the question.
What's your definition of consciousness, James?
Yeah. The last, I'm sure I've covered this effectively, but the word consciousness, as used today, is a misleading term, deliberately reduced to distinguish itself from spirit. To reclaim that, I use the term other people use, like Evelyn Underhill, who wrote the great book of Mysticism. I'd use the term anyway, of spiritual consciousness. By using the word spiritual consciousness, we're reclaiming the reduced version. Consciousness, as the term is used, is the salt from the sea, and spiritual consciousness is all the ocean with the salt in it. It's an extract. It's an extract that they can find, identify, and put in a bottle. It's the salt on your table. This is not the whole thing. So people have to resist this. They've been working. Now that, of course, they say, well, consciousness doesn't exist, and it's working on. They did it starting off in 1863. T. Huxley, the X Club, he set up a group of scientists, and their job was to take spiritual talk, not just to get rid of God, to take any talk about spirit in. That's where psychology came from, really, in the 1870s. Psyche replaced, they could accept that. That's where psychic forces was defined, because they weren't allowed to use spiritual terms in the 1870s. It started there, taking away the supernatural. So I want to take the spiritual back. I'm not letting them use this reduced thing. Because they say, for example, Daphne, Susan Blackmore, others, Top Koch and other neuroscientists, they say consciousness is what happens when you're awake. So when you're asleep, you don't have consciousness. It's absolutely absurd. They're not talking about anything that is proper consciousness, and certainly not this transcendental or transcendent idea. So don't let them use that. They're robbing you. When they use those words, they're shortchanging you. Stick in spiritual consciousness. Make sure that you understand what it is, what we're talking about. Because we know that in the Indian philosophies and whatever like that, you have your indwelling consciousness, cognitive consciousness, cosmic consciousness. For me, consciousness is the entirety. And once they reduce it and put it in a bottle as a method consciousness, it's not it. So don't be codded by that. This is a device, and they're even reducing that because they're going to do away with it. So we start off with this big thing, and they're putting it down here, and then they say, oh, there's nothing there. You can piss off. You don't exist anymore. You're not a human. Resist it. Hang on to your spirit. Say you have a spirit. And we're going to call it a soul or something. I know in different traditions, they don't have the same. Whatever you have, bring it to the forward. Bring your Atman. Don't let it go. Don't let them ruin the debates. Don't let them adulterate or inflate the things away. Consciousness is a misdescription under the Trade Descriptions Act of what the thing is. It's only a reduced version, which is a verificationist thing, something that they have to get. They have to squeeze it down to fit into their limited comprehension. They have to reduce the thing to fit it into the matchbox of their worldview. Don't let them do that. So don't be fooled by that. They've set the agenda. Put some adjective in it beforehand in order to make it work. Don't let them challenge that. Don't let them away with saying that you're unconscious when you're asleep. How could that be? What runs your kidneys? What runs your brain? What runs your dreaming? It's absolutely ridiculous. Let's start challenging them. Don't be afraid because someone has 3 PhDs and a big long names after them. They work for some big and they got loads of money. Don't be intimidated by that. Give it to them. Give it back to them. Use your brain. Use your practical common sense. Ask them questions. Challenge them. Ask them how they come to the things. Test their assumptions. That's what critical thinking is. Critical thinking is not putting people down. It's testing the assumptions of an argument to make sure it's a proper foundation on which, and they don't have it, and that will be revealed. And they will, some of these scientists, I promise you, some of these neuroscientists will say, before we are dead, we were very wrong, we were very stupid, and we were foolish, as some of the artificial intelligence people are already saying. Already, we made a mistake. I don't believe them necessarily. I think they knew, but we were wrong, and this is more dangerous than we thought. I mean, they get a benefit out of that, and they get a benefit out solving the problem. It'll be the same thing. Some of these neuroscientists will turn around and say, look, our model is radically wrong, is radically reduced. So stick to your guns and stick to what the guys, intelligent guys, have been telling you for hundreds and thousands of years. The teachers in all the traditions who vindicate the reality of these, and don't be, because they're wiping out your reality. They're turning you into a hungry goat. So consciousness is the representative reduced term that enables it to interlock with the scientific method that intends to control it. So,
okay. That was profound. Every second of every minute of every hour that we've spent together is just, I don't even feel like we got started. That's the part you need to understand. That's what life is really about. Mm. You're not counting the seconds and minutes. When you can literally go, what day is it? Mm. You know you're embracing and embodying this very human experience that is life. Mm. And you are living it. It's when you start counting the seconds and the minutes that you come to a very limited, very sad, constricted, boxed in idea that everything is hard, everything is fear-based, everything is miserable, everything has a bad ending, which is so not the message that James and I have been supporting throughout this whole conversation. So on that note, I want to thank you, my friend, for sharing your time with us today. And I'm going to see you soon. I expect to see you very soon back on this channel, because we just got started, my friend. I can't thank you. And I am so grateful. I've been looking forward to our conversation ever since that we met in the cyber world. And I'm really, really grateful to have you in my life, my friend.
Me too, and thank you very much. You were transforming there into one of the immortals a few times when I was talking. I could sense that, and I appreciate the conversation. I appreciate people that have committed their lives to finding the way and to sharing the way, and there are many ways to the way. And again, people explore their own tradition. If you've left it behind, go back and sometimes and say, well, can I accommodate this again? Approach at a different level and change those traditions, get involved in those traditions. And again, for anyone that does feel dispirited, we send our thoughts and prayers out, because there's a lot of good people out there. We focus, we hear, we're told about all the uncaring people, all the psychopaths and others. But really, if you think about when you go out, and there's loads of people that don't want to do you harm. There's loads of people that want to help you. There's loads of people that are enriched by helping. It's the nature of the human condition. It's going to be reinforced in the future as we get better at being human again. So don't be dispirited. The only thing that can make you be dispirited is your own acquiescence in the dispiriting process. Everyone has great difficult things to deal with. Some of the people I see dealing best with the suffering they encounter are people who have some spiritual base. I see great examples all around, and I really appreciate the opportunity for the conversation. I was looking forward to it, and the conversation lived up to my expectation. Especially, I haven't really talked to people about Taoism before. It's not as widespread as it should be. It's great to speak to an adept, and you personally. I feel I know you very well now, and I can feel you in the different dimension, and I was looking forward to the conversation. So thanks very much, and good luck to you and your family. So thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, brother, and all the love and light to your family. And I am opening that doorway for future conversation. I look forward to it. I'm going to
yes, definitely, yeah.
I want to thank you. I want to thank the universe for bringing you into my life. I want to thank the Tao. I want to thank God, Jesus, Buddha, universe for being present and emulating and expanding that consciousness, spirit consciousness, for all people that are on the path of their own awakening to who they truly are. And I want to thank the audience for sharing their time with us today. And and God bless you guys. And I am your humble servant in Sifu, Taoist Master Sun Qing, and I'll see you in the next one, guys.